Rich and smoky, salty and savoury. There's nothing quite like homemade bacon. And this one, with a little bit of spice and a little bit of sweetness, smoked over cherry wood, really hits the spot. If you don't have a smoker, that's absolutely fine. I can show you some tips on how to achieve this in a normal home oven. Are you ready for the best bacon you've ever had? I hope so. Let's get snacking. To start with, I've got a nice slab of pork belly. You can make bacon with the skin on, but I find it cures quicker and yields a better result if you take it off. So with a very sharp knife and while being very, very careful, I'm removing the skin. If you're buying your meat from a butcher, you can probably get them to do this for you. It takes a little while, so I'll speed up the footage. Now that that's off, it's time to make the cure. And to do this, we're going to need some pretty precise measurements, starting with the weight of the pork. And mine is 1,169 grams. And we'll use that weight to work out how much we need of the remaining ingredients. Speaking of ingredients, the critical ones for the cure are going to be some salt, preferably some form of pure sea salt, not table salt. Then in addition to the regular salt, we'll need some curing salt. Specifically, cure number 1. This is also sometimes referred to as Prague powder. It's readily available on the internet. This is basically regular salt, but with the addition of 6.25% sodium nitrite. And yes, it does say poison on the package, but that's just to make sure that you don't do anything silly and use too much. When used in a very small and carefully measured amount, this is what gives cured meat its lovely pink colour, its firmness and texture, and helps to stop it from getting botulism. We'll also need some form of sugar, and for some additional flavour, I'm going to be using sugar in the form of honey. Now, the easiest way to work out how much of each ingredient you need is to let the internet do it for you. I'm using this bacon cure calculator from local food heroes, and if I put the weight of my meat in the correct box at the top, it'll then give me a precise calculation for the remaining ingredients. So I can make a selection as to whether I want to stick to EU or American standards. I can specify that I've removed the skin, and then I click calculate, and there's my results. So this lets me know I need 26.59 grams of salt, 11.69 grams of sugar, and 2.81 grams of curing salt. It's telling me that saltpeter is not recommended, which is good because I don't plan on using it anyway, and gives me an optional measure for sodium ascorbate, which I'm not going to use because I don't know what that is. Okay, I've had a quick Google, and it's a sodium form of vitamin C, used as a food additive and preservative, but we're not going to need that today. So with a sensitive set of scales, I'm carefully weighing out my salt, and then very carefully weighing out my curing salt, and then finally weighing out the honey. Now this amount of honey was the minimum amount that was recommended for this cure, so I'm going to make sure that I put in at least that much, but for flavour purposes, I'm going to put in a whole bunch more. Because the salt I'm using is really coarse, I'm breaking it down a bit in a mortar and pestle, but if you're using a finer salt, this won't be necessary. Then for the main flavour component, I've got some beautiful dried chilies left over from last year's harvest. These are serrano peppers, and I'm choosing to use about 10. The exact amount to use isn't as critical with the chilies, you really just want enough to coat the meat and get a good flavour happening. And these have a nice moderate level of spice, a beautiful earthiness, and a slightly smoky quality. And I'm just giving them a coarse crush in a mortar and pestle. Then, once I've added those chilies into the cure mix, I'm also going to add some smoked paprika. This will just emphasize those chili flavors and add a little bit of smokiness, but without adding any extra heat. This bacon should have a nice chili flavor with a subtle but noticeable heat, but not too much. If you'd like it spicier or milder, obviously you can adjust this to suit your preferences. Just use hotter chilies, or maybe swap the paprika for cayenne pepper. I'm getting those all really thoroughly combined. That's going to make it easier to get a nice even coating over the meat. Then to keep things tidy while I do that, I'm popping the meat into a fairly wide and deep Tupperware. Sprinkle that liberally all over the meat, trying to get an even coverage and make sure that all of the meat has at least some of the curing mix on it. Then put the meat in a large snap lock bag, followed by any leftover cure mix. You really do want to get all of that cure mix into the bag with the meat. I'm also adding a handful of bay leaves. These are totally optional and will just add a subtle background flavour. I've got a bay tree in my backyard, so I tend to throw bay leaves in just about everything, but feel free to leave them out. Then in with the measured amount of honey. That'll make sure we've at least got the minimum amount added, but then to boost the sweetness and the honey flavour, I'm adding about 3 or 4 tablespoons more. Ah, nuts. I didn't get any footage of me putting in the extra honey. Oh well, just imagine me putting an extra 3 or 4 tablespoons of honey into the bag. That'll do. Once everything's in the bag, seal it all up and don't forget to write the date on the bag, otherwise it's pretty likely you'll lose track of how long it's been curing for. And then that's going in the fridge to cure. Bacon can take anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks to cure. It really tends to be dependent on the size and shape of the meat. A good rule of thumb is about 1 day for every 500 grams of meat, but with a minimum of 4 days. For this particular piece, I left it for a full week, and it turned out perfectly. And the only thing that I'll do to it during this time is for the first few days, I'll take it out of the fridge once a day, every day, and give it a bit of a massage. That will just help to make sure that all the meat cures evenly. And every time I put it back in the fridge, I'll try and make sure I flip it over so the opposite side is on top. Hang on a minute, which side was which? I think that's right. It's normal for the salt to pull some moisture out of the pork, so don't panic if it's looking a bit moist, but as the days go by and the meat continues to cure, you should feel the meat starting to firm up. After 7 days, I'm giving this a quick rinse, just to rinse off any of the excess cure. The curing salts will have done their job by now, and the other ingredients will have fully flavoured the meat. I'll try and not wash off all of the chili flakes though, because aesthetically I think a few flecks of chili here and there are gonna look really nice. Then I'll pop that on a wire rack and leave it in the fridge to dry. And while that's happening, I'm going to prepare my charcoal grill to get this bacon nice and smoky. So I'm putting some smouldering charcoal on one side of the grill so that the other side will have a mellow heat which will cook the pork low and slow. And then I'm putting the pork on that side with a temperature probe stuck in the thickest part. Then in with a nice little chunk of cherry wood for some beautiful smoky flavour, and on with the lid. And importantly, I'm leaving the vent over the coals closed, but the vent over the meat open. This should allow the smoke to be drawn up from the coals, across the meat, imparting its lovely smoky flavour, and then up out of the open vent. Now, temperature is more important than time here. We want to slowly cook this with plenty of smoke until the internal temperature gets to about 65 degrees Celsius. You can totally do this in a home oven. Just put your pork on a rack in the oven at about 110 degrees. It should take about 60 to 90 minutes to get it up to that 65 degrees. If you're using a home oven and you're looking to get a little extra smoky flavour, what I like to do is paint on a little liquid smoke with a brush before it goes into the oven. And you can check out my other bacon video to see exactly how I do this. So I'll just keep an eye on this and check the temperature occasionally, and every now and then, just to make sure that it cooks nice and evenly, I'm opening it up to rotate the meat, just because the side of the meat that's closest to those coals is going to get a little bit hotter. Once it's hit that final temperature, I'm taking it out and putting it on a wire rack to cool for a little bit before putting it in the fridge to cool completely. And look at that beautiful piece of meat. This is like bacon nirvana right here. It's earthy, spicy, sweet and smoky. Just perfect for a special breakfast or an awesome BLT. To watch me make an even better BLT, check out this video, and until next time, happy snacking.